Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. This is going to be my early review, non-spoiler review for the first ever Avatar young adult novel, Avatar The Last Airbender, The Rise of Kyoshi by FC Yee. So the book is out today. I obviously got it today, read it, and basically if you just want a recommendation for this book, I think you should absolutely buy this. This, I think, is an excellent book, an excellent start to Avatar novels, and I think it's just must read. If you are an Avatar fan, there's pretty much no reason why you shouldn't read this book. I'd go as far to say that it's probably the most in-depth piece of Avatar content we've ever gotten, because the novel format allows them to just cover so much detail. More than, of course, the show. Obviously, the show is going to have the benefit of it's always the first to do a lot of the new stuff. But especially the comics, there's just so much detail here, page to page, compared to the comics. And in terms of just we hit this era of Kyoshi in her teens, and we hit it so hard. There's so much detail about the world at that point in time, especially just the sort of atmosphere in the Earth Kingdom at this point in time, to understand Kyoshi's situation, kind of the situation of every single citizen of the Earth Kingdom. You really get in there because the book has an excellent sense of world building throughout, in that it has what novels can do that a lot of other mediums can't, and that is just this sort of the descriptive narration as you go through the book of here we are, here's the first city, this is where it's situated, this is what it's like, this is what the people are like. Then, you have the characters interacting, the scene, the plot progressing, the character arcs progressing. But it's that setup stuff, the detail of just describing these events to the reader, that you don't often get in a lot of other things. And that the comics occasionally have details like this, of say Smoke and Shadow with the Kage backstory. Or say Korra in general, going into the beginnings stuff and how much information that has. But here it's just the amount of place names, references, explanation of stuff that we know a little bit about that, but we get more of it here. Just characters mentioned as being notable benders or people of this era. Really, really good stuff to see. There's just so much detail throughout. And I've been discussing the world building a lot here, but the plot and character stuff in the book is really, really good as well. This isn't just 440 so pages of this is what this town is like, this is what this town is like. No, it's the rise of Kyoshi. It's Kyoshi's backstory. It's Kyoshi's the start of her journey as the Avatar, and it's really, really well done. Obviously, Kyoshi's a fan favorite character, but she's also a character that I think a lot of fans kind of almost don't give her the credit or depth that she deserves. That's already there prior to this book, if you look deep enough into what we know about her. But this just goes that much further in, and allows you to kind of see the character at the start and how she gets to sort of being the character that we pretty much only know based on the makeup, the headdress, the fans, the get-up. It's the image of Kyoshi rather than the character of Kyoshi. And here we get the explanation on where that comes from. How does she get to the point where she's so driven that she would just, be yeah, I was willing to take Chin out even if he, died accidentally like he did, and so on. It really informs so much of that, even though it is all teenage Kyoshi here. Now, obviously, we know that this is the first of two books. The Shadow of Kyoshi is the second book, and that's coming out next year, I assume around the same time. And that will kind of wrap up our two Kyoshi novels. And in that sense, this book does a really good job at telling a relatively complete story, actually, in that you of course end wanting to know what happens next, but it's not it ends on so many cliffhangers that you feel like you've only read the very first section and you need to know more. it covers a very set story and it gets most of it out there. There's other stuff that happens along the way, of course, and that's what the second book will get into, and there's a few setup pieces that come back into play towards the end. But it feels, fairly complete here, and I like that. It doesn't have the same feel as, say, an individual part of one of the comics, where like you read part one and it's like you want to read part two, but because you want to read part two and three because just to get what the story is, because part one is just a part of the story and it doesn't really feel complete on its own. This does feel kind of complete on its own. It tells its story, but there's also another story, and that's the benefit of having it be basically, the rise of Kyoshi and covering her from being so young. And the next book, I assume, is still going to cover her being pretty young, and we'll see by the end of it if they tackle any of the stuff from later on in her life, given how long she lives. But yeah, like I said, that character stuff is, I think, really, really good throughout. Of like, yeah, just, there's a lot of pressure in a way on the writer to write Kyoshi, the character who most people are kind of just like posting memes about online, of like just how quickly she'll just kill someone if they do something wrong, and adding depth to her to kind of explain how she learns to be like that, where she comes from, where that strive for justice really came from. And it's interesting throughout because her journey takes a lot of twists and turns, and that's why I think the plot of the book, I think, deserves a lot of praise as well, because it's not just your typical Avatar journey. It's not just she's discovered as the Avatar, she goes here to learn this element, then here, then here, then here, then the stuff that we know happens to her. It's not like that. You probably already know, if you've seen any of the preview stuff for this book, that a big part of the plot, the uniqueness of this story, is that at the very start, someone else is thought to be the Avatar, and it's not Kyoshi, and you're kind of wondering, how did this kind of happen, and so on. This other guy is supposedly the person that they found out is the next Earth Avatar, and Kyoshi's like there, and you kind of like, okay, there's something about her, and obviously we as the audience know that she is the actual Avatar, but it's like, how was this mistake made? How did they resolve it? And what happens in terms of getting Kyoshi actually into the spotlight as the Avatar? And so, the first section of the book, it's Kyoshi, almost this like background character. Like, if you weren't aware of where she later goes on, if this was your first time learning about Kyoshi, you just think like, why are we focusing on this sort of background character when Avatar Yun is here and stuff like that? He should be the main character. Why are we focusing on this random character who just happens to like work in the house that the Avatar is being kind of trained in at the moment? But the places it goes, the twists and turns along the way, there are some really, really surprising things that happen in this book. And it's benefited so much by the fact that it is a young adult novel, because I'll say it right now, if you had any worries about the fact that this is a young adult novel in terms of like it not being able to tonally match what you want, really dispel them. This is the most mature Avatar story we've ever had, because when you realize that this book is actually able to do more than the comics, is able to do more than the shows, for sure. As some examples, just the violence, I suppose, would be one thing. How they deal with death. Characters die. Like, they just show, like, bending fights ending with characters being injured. Like, badly injured. Characters dying. And all of these plots, they don't do a jet on this, where they're like, he took a big hit and like something happened, he's gone now. No, when someone dies, they note he was killed in a bending battle, and in that sense, like, it's one of the most kind of pure examples of that. Of like, yeah, if a whole group, if groups of benders went at each other, of course there'd be big injuries. Of course people would die with the power going on here, and you really see that at play here. An example of this would be one of Kyoshi's friends, Rangi, who is a female character. She gets into this kind of like arena battle against the arena champion. So it's just this kind of one-on-one match on this platform. And the way she wins that fight is kind of, I think, a good example of just where this book is willing to go. of like she gets punched once. She's at the start she's doing pretty well in the fight. But the way she finishes it, she's like on the ground. She gets up really suddenly, and just does this crazy spin move around the guy's legs. And the way they describe the injury he suffers, it's like she breaks his leg in multiple places, and they describe his leg as like, what is it, being this like flopping sock of goo or something like that. Like that's how badly she breaks his leg to win that fight. And there's kind of stuff like that along the way. I wouldn't say the book is gory or anything like that, but when a fight calls for a dramatic thing to happen, they'll do that stuff. But it's also a thing where the book doesn't rely on the fact of the table to do that. It will still have more of your, you know, classic bending fight scenes where like no one's really getting hit, but there's an intensity to it and stuff like that. So I think it manages to have that blend of the kind of being the best of kind of both worlds, of being able to do your kind of classic Avatar style fighting, but also do the fighting that you almost expect would be there in the world that's a bit more brutal. So I thought that was really well done. Now, one thing I think a lot of people will have been wondering about with this book is how do they tackle Kyoshi's sexuality? I think the author had come out and said it will be explored, but after reading the book, how did they actually do it? So, prior to this book, we know Kyoshi is bisexual. Turf Wars Part 1 was the book that explained to us that Kyoshi was bisexual. How do they cover it here? And I think they do actually really well. It's really natural. They don't focus too much on it throughout the book, but it works and it fits in nicely. And they do it very simply by just, over the course of the story, showing you that Kyoshi shows romantic interest in a male character at one point, and then she shows romantic interest in a female character at one point. It is very clear. There is no way to interpret the scenes of her with the guy or the girl as being anything but romantic, and that's how they do it. Just very simply making it clear. They don't specifically say it through dialogue or the book's narration saying it, that like, you know, saying that she's bisexual, but just the fact that romance with a guy, romance with a girl, it's clear enough. So I think that's exactly the way you want it done. And I think those relationships, obviously one's focused on more than the other, I won't spoil which, those relationships I think are really well done. And I think people will actually be very happy with this book by the end of it, if that's something that you're going in really wondering about. For me, that was kind of relatively low on the list of things I was kind of like eager to see the book explore, just because, you know, just because of how much stuff this book, being an Avatar novel, can actually cover. So we'll take a quick look at this and we'll get back to some more discussion at the book itself. So I obviously showed you the cover here. It's a hardcover book. There is the spine of it, you can see there. So pretty nice. And then the back, you can see here. Kyoshi stood her ground. It is interesting that they just give you basically a couple of paragraphs from the book on the back, which I find interesting. I think it's more to get across the idea of, you know, Kyoshi saying, "Give me the Avatar." So, you know, that's at the start of the book before she knows she's the Avatar, and, you know, that sort of thing. But there's that. Inside cover is where you get your proper blurb of this, showing you that there's the 9-year time skip after the first chapter and so on. And then it's a hardcover, so this bit actually is just a dust jacket. Now you probably saw this on Twitter already, but this bit is just a dust jacket. There's nothing particularly fancy to go on here. And then the book itself, you have this shiny gold, you know, inlay here for the Rise of Kyoshi and the Avatar logo, blank on the back, and then you have the spine as well in the gold. I think that's pretty cool. You know, get the red kind of inner binding. Now, one thing is that this is the standard version of the book. There is a special edition version out there. The standard version of the book does not feature any illustrations. That was something the ebook, I think, listing on the Abrams Books website said, but there isn't anything like that. The book pretty much gets straight down to business. You know, you start off, you get your title page with, you know, author and stuff like that. You do get the foreword from Mike DiMartino here, which we've seen before. just giving his thoughts on this project. And then you get straight into the first chapter of the book, which is the test. And then the last page of the book is literally just that. You get the last page, that's the actual last page of the story, and we're straight into blank. There's nothing extra. And I'd be a little critical of that because from what I see, the special edition version of the book comes with two pages that feature a map of specific places that they go to in this book, which helps to really give you a perspective of where they go, which I think is borderline needed because you are dealing with effectively like, throughout the entire book, like, because this book can't ever just go ahead and say like, this place is Kyoshi Island, because it hasn't become Kyoshi Island yet. It's kind of just always up in the air of like, wait, is this Kyoshi Island? Because the place is, where a lot of the book takes place, is Yokoya Port. And I believe that it is meant to be Kyoshi Island before it actually becomes known as Kyoshi Island. But it's just little things like that. That map would have really helped to make that clear. And similarly, it would have helped for a lot of people who aren't super into the details and know all the place names. It would have helped to bring a lot of that stuff together. Because the book, like I said, does feature a lot of great references to places that we've seen already in the Avatar universe. So, like, Makapu Village gets a reference. You know, the Siwang Desert gets mentioned. Ba Sing Se, of course, gets mentioned. Omashu, Gaoling. Lots of these places, even some of the more sort of obscure ones, get like little mentions here or there that I think really help to bring things together within this book. And I think just featuring the map as just a standard thing rather than a special edition thing, I think would have been really nice to see. And, you know, just, I think that also features some stuff. I hear it's just basically sketches of the cover rather than it being any other proper illustration type stuff. But the map, I think, is the main thing that this book is missing out on as just a visual reference for where basically they go in this book. Now, it is, for the most part, confined for the most part to the Earth Kingdom. They go to the Southern Water Tribe for a little bit. You get some Air Temple stuff, but most of it is on the Earth Kingdom, and it makes sense why it's in the Earth Kingdom as well. Now, I'm not talking about, very specifically about much of the plot here, because I actually feel there is a lot of spoilers here. I feel I can't even talk about the villain without it being a spoiler. A lot of the characters who end up being sort of main characters in the book, I feel I can't talk about because of the nature of sort of like the twists and turns that the story takes from its kind of, you know, interesting start with like Kyoshi not being known as the Avatar and how that sort of turns around, and then how the story turns around again to get to, I suppose, the sort of middle section of the book and where we are by the end. And I think that's kind of an impressive thing where, like, a lot of the times with the comics, I feel like I go into those non-spoiler reviews and I'm kind of like, most of you guys probably know what's pretty much about to happen, minus like the specifics of how a dialogue scene will go between characters. With this book, I feel like, yeah, like if I say who the villain is, it kind of spoils a big, you know, twist in the book. A lot of characters I feel like I can't talk about without like something kind of coming out. And I like that. I like that for once we have this book where it's like, I really don't want to ruin this for people because I had such a great experience reading through it, not having had any spoilers myself before this. Yeah, I think I'm not going to go on too long here because I will be doing so much other coverage actually getting into the spoilers and the details of the book. But yeah, I think it's just, if you can get a hold of this book, make sure you get a hold of it because it's so worth reading, and I think it's so worth reading without spoilers as well, to just get your reaction to the moments as it happens. Now, there's a few other things I want to talk about, and this is more about the how accessible the book actually is in terms of how available it is. Now, I was able to get this book because I had pre-ordered it online, and I pre-ordered from an online bookseller that I knew would ship out the book as soon as they got it in, which would be before release. So my copy actually shipped out, I think it was like probably Thursday or so last week, so I knew I'd be getting it in or around the release date. But I think for a lot of other people, they ordered it online and it maybe didn't ship out that quickly and they weren't able to get it on release date. Now, I'm from Ireland, if I didn't have the option to order it online, I don't think I actually would have been able to get the book today, because none of the bookstores here, even if they have websites, none of them had it listed, and more than likely they wouldn't have gotten the book in. From what I could see, I checked just before recording this video, the book is not available digitally in the UK and Ireland, as far as I can tell. It's not available on Google Books. It's not available Kindle, which are obviously the two most obvious ones. And then I think after that, it's like, you know, what are the other like main places to get like ebooks? And it's just one of those things where like if you don't have a Kindle version, it just feels like, what are you doing? And so I think that is something that like they need to make sure that the book is as available as possible. I mean, already I've seen a few people mentioning like, why is this book not available on Audible? Why is there no audiobook version of it? Which I think is sort of an oversight on behalf of just the entire project, that it seemed like along the way an audiobook was just never factored in at all, when it should have been, knowing the fandom that you're dealing with. Just because one, audiobooks are always entertaining and good, and it's a great way to kind of experience the story, but because, you know, this is a 440-page book. There's not a ton. It's not overloaded with words per page, in that it's very readable. The writing style is, you know, detailed without being like overly detailed and overly wordy, so you get through the book relatively quickly. But it's still a 450-page book, and reading especially is one of those things where like you are reading and that's kind of all you are doing. Whereas at least with the audiobook, you know, you can do other stuff because you're just listening to it, and you can do other stuff at the same time. And it's always an option, because I'm aware like not everyone has the time to read, especially with it being 2019. You know, you sort of need to make it as accessible to experience the story in any way possible. So I'm hoping the book does very well, so that I suppose maybe going into the second book they maybe consider the audiobook and can do both of them kind of back to back. That would be really, really cool. Especially like, imagine they were able to get Kyoshi's voice actress to do the reading for the audiobook. That would be really, really cool. But yeah, there is a lot to discuss. I'm so excited to discuss a bunch of the sequences from this book that reveal new information. I think the general story is good, but also just those little bits and pieces of like them discussing some like random kind of piece of information about the Avatar world that just happens to come up in a chapter. It's really, really well done. So yeah, that's my sort of vague, non-spoiler review for the book. For me, it's pretty much nothing but praise. The only negatives, I think, just come down to the fact that it's about the sort of presentation, in a way, of the book, of like the standard edition not featuring that map that isn't the special edition. I think that it was an oversight, that that should have been considered a standard thing for this book. I feel that maybe this book could have done with having a few sort of light novel-esque pages throughout, just so visually we got a sense for the characters. I like it when books do that. That's why I really like reading light novels, is that in just like maybe over the course of like a 200-page book, you get maybe 10 or so pages that are pictures to show you visually like, this is what this character looks like, and a sense for what's happening in this scene. I think a book like this would have worked really well with something like that, to, you know, just as an obvious thing of like, show what Kyoshi looks like before the makeup and stuff like that. We get a description of her, but, you know, actually show visually what she looks like that. What do the other characters actually look like? Because there's some pretty interesting characters here. Like, there's an airbender who's described as being like a mountain of a man. This like huge airbender character who is kind of described as being basically as tall as Kyoshi. That seems like a really interesting and sort of impressive character. Just little bits and pieces like that. And then the fact that it doesn't seem to be as available, depending on your region, as possible. So the impression I get is that if you're in America or Canada, you shouldn't have any problem. The book should just be available in any of those big book retailers, Chapters, Barnes and Nobles, that sort of thing. But outside of there, I think because it's not the most well-known publisher, It may not have the best international reach, so ordering the book, the physical copy of the book online, is probably your best bet at this point in time. Given that, like I said, I personally, from the obvious places, couldn't find the book to get digitally. So that's, I think, an unfortunate thing, and I hope they fix that. I didn't check actually. Is it available in America digitally right now? I assume it is from somewhere, but as I said, I'm not overly sure. So, yeah, like I said with the book, definitely pick it up if you can. I will be doing lots of coverage on this. Like I said, I think in the video yesterday, I'm planning to pretty much do chapter by chapter analysis of the book. So you'll probably see that start tomorrow. With the first chapter, going in depth on it, covering as much as possible throughout the book. So you'll get a lot of videos on this. We're also going to cover it on the podcast as well. And then we'll wrap it all up once all that detailed coverage is done. And then I think tomorrow as well, there's a bunch of news happening. Like everything is hitting at once basically right now. Like Runes of the Empire Part 3 cover and description revealed today. Some preview pages for Imbalance Part 3 came out today as well. This book releases today. Comic-Con's coming up at the weekend. Like everything is hitting at once. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, that's my initial thoughts on the book. Hugely positive. If you read the book already, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Other than that, any questions you have, I'll try and answer them below. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.